Yep, well said.
Okay. So two more topics that we've lined up, but please, again, feel free to keep those questions coming. We have a bunch that have come in so far, but let's grab a few more if we can. So the next topic is around executive involvement. You know, it seems to be a common refrain that software projects are more successful if the executive is involved. Is it required when it comes to enterprise social networks? Diane?
Well, required is a strong phrase, but you really have to sometimes state things strongly in order to make your point come across. And I can't tell you how many times I've talked to some poor enterprise social network manager who says, I can't get my leadership involved. They don't have the time. They're too busy, or they don't understand it. They know there's something there, but they don't know enough about it to really understand why this is different, why this is important. When we do see top-down efforts, I'm talking about organizations like Bosch is a great example of CEO-led social business change, saying this is how we're going to run our company. The speed at which that 300,000 person organization switched over and used social networks for, I think it was a top 25 use cases across the organization, budgeting, resource allocation, planning, and so on. They achieved that entire project in 2 years. They actually said after 2 years, well, we're done. This is completely rolled out. We're operating our business this way. Now we're going to go on to the optimization phase. That's remarkable. We don't see those. It usually takes a half decade for that change to really happen without that driving force of leadership. And the data actually shows that, and I'm quoting from memory here, but I believe that when you have at least one very senior leader involved in your effort, actively using it, being a sponsor, being a champion, and going out there and telling people this is how we're working, it accelerates the process of getting to a successful outcome about 2.5 times. I'll dig up that later and put it under the hashtag. But that really makes an enormous amount of difference, and your failure rate is also higher without that executive involvement. Now, as Tony's going to go into, can you succeed without it? Well, maybe, but it's not. It's really hard work. And so one of the great examples we see, like BASF, is another really notable success story. They got a board-level sponsor from the outset. They've had long, hard going in getting broad adoption in a highly fragmented divisional company, but it's only been as successful as it has been because of that executive involvement. So I would say, let's just make it clear so that we don't dilute the message. Executive involvement is required to get the best results from enterprise social.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it falls to me to take the contrary here, and I'm not as passionate about this one because it's a more nuanced topic, but this obviously is a kind of a mantra, has always been a mantra in IT in particular, that without executive buy-in, nothing's going to happen. And, the Bosch and BASF are both excellent and well-known use cases. I would argue that for every one of those, there's 100 who have been, reasonably or very successful, without it. And the thing that I think, Diane, you hinted on that I'll linger on a little longer is that everyone is trying to get C-suite attention. I can guarantee you right now there are webinars going on about has to pay more attention to, the C-suite needs to pay more attention to insurance, has to pay more attention to compliance, needs to definitely pay more attention to cybersecurity. And so, we're not the only ones trying to get their attention. And it doesn't mean necessarily that we shouldn't try, but we also need to, as a community, come up with ways of still being effective. And it turns out, and there are been some surveys around this as well, that a lot of times the resistance is not necessarily at the executive level, but at the managerial and director level below. And that you have supervisors and directors who are reluctant to have their own people engaging in social networks and doing other sorts of things, potentially even collaborating across silos, because it's a distraction they perceive it as a distraction to their immediate needs and KPIs. And so I think instead of necessarily going for the gold and getting the C-suite champion, although if you can do it, great, but that doesn't necessarily preclude you from being successful, and that there's some harder work that's a little bit more, type attrition warfare, where you've got to you've got to get in there and engage people at the levels below and have them see that it's in their interest and work with them to create the support for people at the coalface to actually use these systems.
Yeah, and I would just concur. You know, middle management is often least prepared for this and most threatened, or at least they believe they're most threatened by enterprise social networks, and that is another ideal base to build support for the success of your efforts.